Okay, so we're going to do chapter 8, 256, 257, and 258. We're going to do some booleans. Let's open up our... I cleaned up my computer a little bit. I hope you guys are impressed. Okay, so let's just have a little fun and idle. So I love examples. I think examples have helped me academically for years and years. You can kind of see patterns with examples. And examples, they solve two problems, right? Because they help you to put things in context with regards to actual learning and actual, instead of theory, right? You're doing actual examples. And then also they help you to create the conclusions and the patterns. They actually help you to see. Sometimes when you read something in a book or you hear someone lecture about something, it sounds like it doesn't really stick until you see examples. So that's why I love. So right here, even if we punch this in right now, what are we seeing about the Boolean data type? Well, a 0 is false and a 1 is true. Okay, well what about like a negative number? It's true. Okay, well what about like a big positive number? It's true. Okay, well what about the word true? A string true. What about the string false? Oh, maybe that was a capitalization issue. Maybe, what about this? Wow, they're all true. So the only false we saw right now was 0. Now, if you guys remember, I don't know if we talked about this before, but now that says false. Oh, sorry, identified. So let's do capital F. So the name false is not defined. So the word false, capital F in Python, without the quotes, is false. So it is a keyword, a special word, that's not surrounded by quotes, and it's false. So let's actually do type. Let's do type false. What is it going to say? It's going to be bool, right? And then if we do type false, lowercase, what's it going to say? Error, right? Because false has not been defined. Let's say false is false. What do you think that it's going to be? It's just going to be an object. An object, I believe an object representation or an object instantiation of the false keyword, which is always outputs to false, which is a class of bool. Okay, so, and then true, the word, remember those to be capitalized, so the word false, capital, the word true, capital, not in quotes, output to false and true respectively. So we've seen right now that bool of 0 is false, and bool of the capital word false is false. What else is false? Well, what about this? One character. It's true. So we want to try things that we think might be false, right? If there's a bunch of truths, because we're starting to get patterns, and this is helpful too when I'm talking with a student about finding factors like the lowest common denominator in fraction, for example. Well, the lowest common denominator, you are, what's the best pattern? What's the best way to solve that? Well, I'm sure some of you computer scientists are going to think of a very, very fast way to solve that. But just in terms of your brain, are you going to take the smallest number and start doubling it, double, triple, quadruple? No, you're kind of wasting time, because obviously the numbers below the largest number like let's say you have a fraction whose denominator is 3, another fraction whose denominator is 4, another fraction whose denominator is 16. If you start at 3, you go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Well, you know that none of those are going to be the LCD, right? Because 16 is greater than all those numbers. So you're literally wasting time. So what you want to do is you want to find the fastest method and the most obvious method in terms of solving a problem. And this is why patterns are so important. This is why people who study a lot of math, they generally, not all the time, but generally, they do a lot better in computer science. They've been practicing patterns and just the simplicity and logic as well. I mean, there's people that studied cog sci. I'm sure liberal arts like me. I had a professor who studied cog sci. He now teaches computer science. He's like the chair at this college where I took a C++ class, Andrew Scholar, and as well, I've known a lot of people that studied math and computer science, or just I think the girl that started TaskRabbit, Leah Busk, I believe, or yeah, she studied math and computer science, I believe. A lot of folks did. I'm not sure if Jeff Bezos did, but I think I don't know. I know a little bit about these guys, but I know what I see, and I think that's one of the big reasons. It's just looking for like patterns. So it's the same thing here. So if we didn't have this book, right, this Professor Zelle book, how would we sort of sniff around to find these rules? And this is another thing that I like doing, which kind of takes me off sheet, because you can get stuck in like programming, and when it gets, if you feel like you don't have enough meat there, enough like substance, then it really helps. I find it very helpful to going to python.org, and just sniffing around these different data types, you know, uh, and just looking around, just learning what these methods do, functions, function call, I mean, just all of it. And so this is helpful. So even if we didn't know exactly what false and true was, we're sort of crafting a story. And it might not capture every case, but I think it's a pretty good representation. So yeah, so I mean, what's the pattern here? Bool of 0 is false, right? Bool of false is true, but that's a string. That's a string that has characters in the string. So you're thinking, oh, any string with at least one character is true, right? Any data type, or any string with at least one character is true. What about 0 characters? What about the empty string? False. Oh, and then you're thinking, okay, well, let's take it. And then so any number with any value is true, right? Including negative values. Well, let's just try, fractions. I mean, I'm sure like -9/10. True, right? Okay. So let's do, I'm sure it won't be an issue, but let's do a decimal. True, all of it's true. Okay, a lot of trues. We're looking for cases where it's going to be false. Well, let's do, so what pattern will, even if we weren't looking at, 256, it's just how to think about, this exploration. So you're like, okay, if there are no characters in a string, it's false. A 0 is false if it's an integer. Everything else is true. And then as well, there's the keyword false with a capital F, and then the keyword true, the capital T, and that bool of false outputs false, bool of true outputs true. So what about an empty array? False. What about an empty dictionary? What do you think? I think false. So what's our new thesis? And it's also like going after information and saying, okay, well, what's our new thesis? So anyways, to go back to that math problem, we're going to, so if it's 3, 4, and 16, where are you going to start? What's the fastest, easiest way to do it? This is how I would do it. This is how I would program it, actually. Well, in my brain, I don't know if this is, going to be the smartest way to, I think so. I think this is how I would program it, actually. But you think about the largest denominator of the denominators that you have. even if you had 2 fractions or 3 fractions or 33 fractions, you find the largest denominator, so let's say 16, and you double it. No, first you check 16. Does 3 go into 16? Nope, evenly, with no modulo, with no remainder. Nope. Then you double 16, 32, right? Then you triple 16, 48. Does 3 go into 48? Yes. Does 4 go into 48? Yes. So what is the lowest common denominator of 3 and 4 and 16? It's 48. So that's why I love examples. I love them. And if you get too caught up in code and you're just like, your brain is like short circuiting and going haywire, then spend some time looking at examples and just looking around python.org, testing, little code snippets in idle. Trust me, guys. I feel, even though I'm still relatively new to programming, I feel like it's extremely helpful to be able to bounce around. And then when I get sick of, just doing little idle commands and tests and whatnot, and like little runs, then I'll get back to doing actual programs and trying to solve bigger problems. So okay, because right now I'm just like learning syntax, etc. So all right, so what's our thesis now? And our thesis is going to change based on these examples, on more and more examples. So if it's an integer, it's 0 only, false. If it's capital keyword false, it's false. Everything else is true. Let's say there was another capital, ing. It has to be a keyword. So in the idle shell, it has to be orange, and I'm sure you can look up the keywords again in python.org. A lot of these different websites, etc. Python.org is definitely the place, the source to spend a lot of time. And then as well, right here, anything that's blank, any string that's empty string outputs false. Empty array or empty list in Python outputs false, and an empty dictionary outputs false. So now we solved that. Everything else, pretty much everything else, would output true. Are we going to catch every example? No, but we're probably pretty close. I mean, it's pretty obvious what true and false do. The other thing is, if you want to test like an array that has 0 in it, what do you think about that? I think it's actually going to be true in a weird way, because the array, I don't know why. I think it's going to be true. I could be wrong. Let's try it. Oh, it is true. Yeah, because the array is like, I guess, an extra filter. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. But my guess, and that's the other thing too, is like when you're writing code, when you're typing in these commands or these tests, you want to think about what you think the answer might be. You want to have like a game, like a fun game. And I'm telling you guys, this really helped me in school, and it really helped to burn things into my brain. To always look for patterns. Always look for patterns. Always look for, look for your edge cases. Look for, and then just update your hypothesis. You have a hypothesis, update it, or have a theory, update it. Update your thesis essentially as you look at more examples. Just keep your brain active. So, all right. So now we can look at page 258, and we can sort of get a feeling for how we can make this work. Like, there are a couple of ways. I'm sure there are a lot more than just those ways, but let's just do page 258. All right, so let's say ants. And let's just say ants.py. And ants.py. Okay, so is input. What flavor do you want? And then vanilla. And then if ans does not equal a blank, an empty string, right? Which would also output to false. Flavor gets ans, else flavor gets vanilla. All right, that's a pretty simple program. Let's run it in idle. So then let's just click enter. Well, since we just typed enter, oh, and then flavor, because we didn't print it. So flavor is vanilla. So that jumped to the else because it says if ans does not equal empty string, which is just an enter, right? So there's another way to put this. So if ans, then flavor is vanilla, right? So if ans is true, means if the user types something, anything, for ans as their input, then we'll call flavor it vanilla. Otherwise, flavor gets, or flavor is assigned the string vanilla. Else, flavor, actually, flavor is assigned ans. Excuse me. So if the person types any answer, then the flavor gets whatever that answer is, right? That makes sense. Otherwise, the flavor is vanilla. What that offers to the user is if someone types just enter, then then flavor is gonna get the value of vanilla, the string. So, all right, let's run that again. And some of this stuff might seem a little bit remedial. I really, that's one thing that I went over with, I go over with some of these students, is just telling them, look, don't overanalyze. Like, you want to analyze, I mean, but don't overanalyze. Like, oh, this is harder, this is easier, this is this. I mean, you want to overanalyze. You want to analyze it just in terms of how much time you're going to need, but that's about it. I mean, if this is the road that you have to travel to get the certification or this degree or whatever, and this is the road you decided to take, and you decided to commit and swing, and you can re-inventory. But I think but yeah. So this might seem a little bit remedial, but just there's a reason. There's a reason he put it in chapter 8. There's a reason. So I always have some kind of faith, especially when you've got a very respected computer science book, for example, author, etc. So that's it's sort of a plus. So okay, so we enter it, and then flavor again is now vanilla because we entered vanilla, or we just pressed enter, which is the empty string. Remember, the empty string is false. So if we're to run it again, and we typed in van, and we typed in flavor, it's going to be van. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you very much for your patience. Let's do one more succinctly, because I want to do the last. The last two. So 258, the same idea can be more succinctly coded by treating the strings themselves as Boolean and using an or. So let's do that. Let's comment out this code. Let's punch in ans gets input What flavor do you want? Vanilla? And then flavor is ants. Flavor gets ants or vanilla. Ooh, that's kind of clean. Okay, so let's go over that again. So flavor gets ants, means whatever the ants is, or vanilla. So it's going to be or if ants is false. That's sort of what they're teaching here in terms of true and false and the Boolean and all that stuff. How to use Booleans. There's a lot of ways, but this sort of cleans up code even more, makes it more tight, fewer lines, etc. So this is an important point here. So if ants is true, meaning it's anything except for a 0 or an empty string, then flavor is gonna get ants. If it's false, then it's going to be, because the non-empty answer is interpreted as true. But I want to see also you want to look at like what are the potential edge cases, or what are the potential ways to break this, or what how, and then also just like using input, using as opposed to eval. I mean, there's ways to test this stuff, just to practice, and it's all about practice. That's what burns stuff in your brain, guys. It's just sheer practice. And I know this from academically. Obviously, I'm still kind of a rook in Python, but I'm getting better. So, what's my question mark? Well, my question mark is, well, like, what if I typed a 0? Input's going to take in the string. A 0 in terms of bool. Let's see, because that's the first thing I'm thinking about is a 0. What will happen if you type in a 0? I think it's going to. Is it going to kick out an error? Guess not. Let's see. What do you think? Vanilla. No. Because flavor gets ants, it's got to be 0. It is. It's a string of 0. So I should know that. I feel terrible. It's 2 steps up, 1 step back. That's programming. At least that's how it is for me. All right, so here we go. All right, so what flavor do you want? Vanilla. Let's run it. 0. Flavor. I can't run it again. Why doesn't let me run it again? Oh, right here. Excuse me. Okay, so now let's punch in vanilla. Vanilla. Okay, so how do we know? So this is kind of cool. So flavor's going to get vanilla. Why does flavor get vanilla? Because we gave it an OR statement. So it's either going to get whatever the answer is, as long as it's not an empty string, or it's going to get vanilla. What if you punch in an empty string? It's going to be false. So then it's going to become vanilla. That's the last test. It's the last test I'll do for this one. Why am I doing that? Okay, now I'm going to go here and run it again. I think it's going to be vanilla. Press enter. Vanilla. So because it's false, so if we have an empty string or an empty list or an empty array, an empty list or an empty dictionary. Actually, this is a little different because even if we have an empty Let me try it. That's actually a really good test. Let's try an empty list. Let's try an empty list. Let's do this. Yeah, okay. This is an interesting one. And this shows my rookiness. Is so my guess is any empty list or empty dictionary or empty anything except for string is going to return ants. Flavor is going to get the value of ants. However, if we get 0, including 0, if we type in 0, it's actually going to bring in the string version of 0 because it's input, right? Input takes a string. It's assigned a string value, right? So just think input string value. It's all practice. You know, even if I remember this, maybe I forgot it, then I remember it again. Note cards are helpful, Quizlet, all kinds of things, but you know, just sheer practice just burns things in your brain. So yeah, so it's the input. So if there's anything in this string, because we're using input, you know, to essentially call the function, which is it's essentially the function of input, and but if we type, if we have an empty string or we type the word vanilla, then flavor gets vanilla. Extremely interesting 2 lines of code, and I really like it. Okay, so now let's do 1 line of code. Let's be our last. Let's be our last code for this. All right. So flavor gets, and that's the key. The hardest thing to do, guys, is to be, and again, I'm just only speaking from past experience, is to try to understand as much as you can and just patiently, slowly plod along. And when you have questions that you think are big, that you think are going to come up and like bite you, you know, then you got to ask them. You got to figure out how do I get all these questions written down? How do I get them distilled? You know, maybe you got 6 questions and you're like, well, I don't want to upset this guy. I don't think he has an hour for me. Maybe he has 20 minutes or half an hour. Maybe let me go ask 3 people. You know, the smartest kid in my class, second smartest kid in my class, and my teacher, or you know, my, you know, or this tutor at this, you know, school, or this, you know, like whoever, right? Just try to strategize in terms of solving problems and getting questions answered, and also just test. That's the great thing about programming is you can test. You know, test stuff on idle, test stuff on your IDE, etc. Try to get the problem solved and look around. You know, we got Stack Overflow. I mean, there's just a lot of great ways to solve the problem, but try to just go through it super fast. Like try to figure out a lot of these edge cases, and so you can really understand what's going on under the hood, especially when you're learning your first programming language. But even I think even as you go along. But anyways, I'm probably rambling a little bit in this video. All right, so let's see. Vanilla. Okay, so then this is going to be vanilla or vanilla. Okay, so let's theorize what we think is going to happen. It's a style thing. Professor Zelle does make the disclaimer that, you know, don't confuse, you know, any other developers either on your team or who might be, you know, maintaining your code down the road. So maybe having comments and whatnot. But anyways, this I think was awesome. It was interesting because an empty string or the string lowercase vanilla basically assigns flavor vanilla, the string vanilla. Now here it says, what flavor do you want? Vanilla. So flavor gets the input of what flavor that you want. So any true sort of any true output by the user, or that's actually input. Any input by the user that's not an empty string or the word vanilla is going to output true, right? The Boolean output of that is going to be true. So flavor is going to get whatever the value of that string is, right? That inputted string is. So it's exactly the same as this. The only two values that would assign the string vanilla to flavor are variable are an empty string or the word vanilla. Okay, all right. I think I understand this, or at least 80 to 90% of it. I mean, and then again, just more and more examples and practice and whatnot. But yeah, I think that it's the same thing, and he sort of hinted at it as well, obviously, in the book. So okay, so let's go through it. It's pretty interesting, though. Really interesting. Okay, I don't know. I guess I didn't save it or something. I thought I did. I guess I didn't. Let me reopen this. All right. So let's run it. 0. Remember, it's a string. So it's going to be 0. The string 0. So those single quotations. Okay, now let's run it again. Let's do capital vanilla. Let's flavor. Oh, capital vanilla. Right? Because it's still, it's true. So this is true. Right? Now this is true also. But it's saying that if this word is inputted as the string, then flavor gets this word, or, because this is true or false, or vanilla or false, which is like wrapped up in one. I think that that's sort of what this means. So this is going to be true, or this can be vanilla or false, and it's gonna assign the word vanilla to flavor. I think so. Let's try it again. Oh, nope. So that doesn't output to that doesn't, because that outputs to false. That's interesting. So it's not false. It's actually not false. It's actually just the enter. It's the enter. So even though this outputs to false, this is saying that if there's any string, including an empty string, interesting distinction. This is any string, including an empty string, which actually the Boolean type of that empty string is false, then that's what it's going to output. Or vanilla. But typing enter makes flavor vanilla. That I know. Okay, cool. So typing, that's probably what I was trying to say. Or maybe I thought it was 3. I'm not. So yeah, it will be typing enter an empty string or the word vanilla, lowercase v. Actually, I was wrong. My hypothesis was wrong, or maybe I was a little jumbled. But it's only the word vanilla or the enter, right? Or the enter, because there is no input. Because there's no input. So it's not necessarily true false, it's just input, any input. Here, even though an empty string is outputs to false, it's still input as far as this one line of code is concerned. So that's why it outputs to that one line of code. It doesn't output to vanilla. So let's run this again, and obviously we're going to type in vanilla, which has to be a string. Otherwise, we'll have an, actually, are we going to have an error? I don't think so, because we know it's a string. So type in whatever you want. Without quotation marks. Yes, yes, yes. So hopefully that helps. It's this stuff got really early on. It was really tricky, and this was one of the things that made it really tricky. This is why books like this are really helpful, because they just allow you to be very patient. And I think he explains things in really succinct but thorough ways. So thank you very much.